Hello, folks. I am Rodney A. Brooks, and welcome to RodneyABrooks.com. We're today welcoming a special guest, Jennifer Belmont Jennings, um, trust and estate attorney at MGD Law in St. Louis, Missouri. Now, and I say special guest because Jennifer is both an attorney and a certified financial planner. And she was selected on the 40 under 40 list, the St. Louis Business Journal. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello. Thank you for
Okay,
having me.
okay. So we're gonna talk for a little while about basically estate planning. And so, I know it's something that many people put on the back burner for a bunch of reasons. So let's start out talking about why do people delay or why are they hesitant about estate planning?
I think there are a few reasons. One, it costs money. And I think that's an obvious thing. People don't like the idea of putting money out there. They don't like to spend money on things. They like to spend money on going on vacation and a lot of frivolous things, right? And so it is hard because it does cost money. I think it forces you to talk about things that are not always pleasant either. And I think a lot of people don't want to do that. They have to decide who's going to raise my children. Is this sibling going to have their feelings hurt when they find out they weren't chosen? Maybe they don't have somebody that they want to choose. You have to decide who you're comfortable with seeing all of your finances and taking care of things. And you have to think about the fact that we're going to die. That's not always a pleasant thing to think about for everybody, or becoming incapacitated. You might be in a state where you can't do things for yourself. And I think people just don't like to talk about that. And I also think we all have a lot going on. People have jobs, they have families, they're doing things. This is something extra. I mean, I think about all the things in my own life that I need to do at home, and it might be like a basket of laundry that's been sitting there for 2 weeks, or something in the dryer that I haven't taken out, and it is one more thing that you need to do. So I do think there are lots of reasons, but I like to think those are excuses and they're not really that valid. So,
Okay, so so let's just sort of move on to why it's so important that people do have an estate plan.
so I think it's important to note first, you do have an estate plan. It's just not one that you designed. So states have their own statutes that govern how property is going to be distributed if something happens to you and you don't have a formal plan in place. They also have a process for people to go through if you become incapacitated, to have a guardian or a conservator appointed for you. I think one of the things that, not to bring up Britney Spears because she always gets brought up, but I think that brought to light the process that takes place when somebody is not in a state to manage their own affairs, what needs to happen, going to court, having someone petition the court, appointing the court, or the court appointing that person. So I think you have an estate plan, right? It just may not be what you envision. And so there are lots of different reasons to have an estate plan. One is you're directing how you want your assets distributed on your death. That may not be in line with what happens according to state statute. Some people might be surprised to find out in some states, at least in my state, that if you don't have an estate plan in place and you didn't have beneficiaries on an account, that a spouse and children will share in those assets. It's not all just going to go to your spouse. If you had an account in your own individual name without a transfer on death on it, if the asset goes to probate, it doesn't just go to your spouse because you're married, at least in my state. So you want to make sure your assets go to the people you want, as well as when you want them to get there, right? Children cannot inherit property when they are under 18. They're not an adult. And so money that is left to them through a vehicle that's not an actual estate plan, it's going to go into a conservatorship, and they're going to get that money when they're 18. So when you have a big life insurance policy and maybe you don't want that money going to your kids right when they're 18. They might not make the choices that you had envisioned for them. I think it's also about appointing agents to handle your affairs if you can't do that. So, we have so much, in our society with like declining mental health and cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's, dementia. And a lot of people, especially I think a lot of baby boomers right now are experiencing this with their own parents. And the oldest baby boomers are already there. But they're experiencing having to take care of somebody and handle somebody's finances and bill paying. And when you have named those people in your documents, it's a lot easier process to start allowing someone else to handle your affairs as well, as opposed to going through the court. So there are reasons to do that make a lot of sense. It's practical. It's also more cost effective to plan as opposed to having it all done on the back end, which is a court process.
Okay, and let's get really, really basic. What is an estate plan?
It's really a collection of documents that dictate how you want your assets distributed, when you want your assets distributed, to whom you want your assets distributed on your death, and also documents that appoint people to manage your financial affairs if you are incapacitated or on your death, or to name guardians for your children. So it's really, the plan is creating this set of documents that does the things that you want it to do. And then you implement that. There are steps that you take after the fact, like updating beneficiaries, changing account titles, maybe moving your house into a trust. So the plan is what you have put together to make sure your assets go where they need to go, and then people are put in charge of making that happen.
Okay, now, okay, so you touched on the part about making sure that plan is updated. Um, as things change, how often do you need to update your estate plan?
I think a good rule of thumb is to check in with your estate planning attorney every 5 years, or if you've had some major life event, there's been divorce, death, something like that, your family circumstances have changed significantly. And also, when you hear buzz about a lot of big tax law changes, and when you start seeing lawyer chatter on the various social media outlets about laws that might be passed, things with the estate tax, things that have to do with your, retirement accounts. When that chatter happens, it's also a good time to check in. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do an update, but I think a good rule of thumb is 5 years, or a big event or a big law change. And I think also it's important to note documents like your financial power of attorney and your healthcare declaration probably need to be updated a little bit more frequently than other documents, because it's not because they're no longer valid, but a lot of times banks and different institutions are reluctant to accept documents that are too old. And then, even though they're legal, and then you have to call the lawyer to write the letter to say this is still valid. And you're dealing with people who their day job is not, reviewing statutes and estate planning documents. And so those, we do tend to see a little bit more pushback from the institutions, the bigger institutions, on like the healthcare declarations and the financial powers of attorney when they get old.